Okay, I'm back. So last time we got through the pawn shop. So we understand why Scott's name was on that pawn shop receipt. And we had people from the pawn shop testify as to what Scott and Lacey sold. So we know she has sold some of Grandma's jewelry. Not much, like $140 one time, $110 the next time. It's not a fortune that she's selling. Now in January, Detective Brocchini, who is the lead homicide investigator, he claimed that there was financial motive for the crime. And what he had said was he had begun telling people that there was a $250,000 life insurance policy that Scott had taken out on Lacey, and that it was pretty recent. It gets leaked to the Modesto Bee newspaper. They make it a headline. Like the very next morning, it's all over the newspaper that Scott was did something to his wife because there was a life insurance policy. At this point, this is still pretty early. Lacey's still just missing. There has been no body found, nothing like that. But they're very suspicious of Scott. And Brocchini is trying, this is when he is telling people bad things about Scott. He's trying to get Scott's friends and family and Lacey's family to flip on Scott. So what he does is, as soon as the Modesto Bee, and he testified to this, this is directly from his testimony, from the cross-examination, he admitted that at 6 a.m., once the newspaper comes out and people are waking up and they're starting to see the newspaper, Brocchini starts to call Scott's friends. And he's kind of like, yeah, did you see the paper today? I don't know. Your boy looks pretty guilty to me, because he's trying to get Scott's friends to turn on him. And he's saying, well, did Scott ever say anything to you about having money problems? Like, he's trying to pin Scott's friends down into saying something bad about Scott and his finances. So he's kind of working this lie. Now, what's interesting is by this time, Brocchini already knew the story behind these insurance policies. He knew, he'd already spoken with the agent, but he let this out so that he could convince people that Scott had a motive. In truth, here's what those insurance policies were. So the prosecution called a gentleman by the name of Brian Ulrich. He's a financial advisor, and he knew Scott and Lacey. He had another career. I can't remember what he did before, but he became a financial advisor. He called up Scott and Lacey and said, hey, listen, I'd love to, work with you, get some advice. You guys are a young married couple. Scott and Lacey had just purchased their home in October of 2000. This is January of 2001. So this is a couple months later. They sit down with Brian Ulrich. He recommends a couple of things. So as part of just their long-term financial plan, he recommends life insurance policies, and he recommends like each of them having, IRA accounts, right? And so the first thing he suggests is that the life insurance policies, when they're talking about the amount, Scott's the breadwinner. So the idea that if something should happen to Scott, they want to make sure that Lacey is taken care of. So they do a $250,000 life insurance policy on Scott. Lacey's, Brian suggested, should be $100,000 because, again, Scott's the breadwinner. So if something happened to Lacey, Scott wouldn't be in as bad a financial way. But Lacey, his testimony, he testified that Lacey said, nope, make mine $250,000 as well. It was her decision to up her life insurance to $250,000, which was well beyond what their financial advisor suggested. And then they also opened IRA accounts for both of them. And Scott had some funds from their savings that he rolled right into his. Their premiums for the insurance policies were $150 a month. The IRA was $75 each. That meant $450 combined, $450 per month total cost that came automatically out of their joint checking account each month to pay for these long-term investments. Brian Ulrich, on cross-examination, did testify that Scott Peterson never, after Lacey went missing and all the way up through the trial, he never once reached back out to ask about the life insurance policy. He never asked about cashing it in, never wanted to know any of that. And he couldn't have anyway because, and this is what Brocchini also knew, is that a life insurance policy is only good if the person is dead, right? So if she's just missing, which is what she was very early on for a very long time, Scott couldn't have cashed in anyway because it takes 7 years before a missing person is declared an unalived person. So he couldn't have even tried to cash it in until 7 years, until she was missing 7 years. And remember, this appointment that they have with Brian Ulrich is in January of 2001. This is almost 2 full years before Lacey goes missing. So he recently took out a life insurance policy on her. It's a big fucking lie. They both had insurance policies on each other as part of their long-term what if something happened investment plan. Now, they also put into record, and again, this is the prosecution, they put into record Scott's credit report. And you can pause and blow this up and look at each and every single one creditor. There are some where they have bigger credit card limits. So it was discovered that he had a couple of credit cards where there was a high level of spend, right? So maybe $20,000 that he owed on a credit card. But you see over here, all the yellow highlights, every single one of them was paid on time and they were never ever late on anything. Here's another page. And again, you see some of the amounts that they have on cards, and then you see everything is paid on time. So again, I love the idea of seeing all this. Their argument is, look at how many credit cards he's gotten, da, 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 da. But when someone else can say, yeah, but they've never missed a payment, they're never late on anything, it doesn't appear, this doesn't give me the impression that they're drowning in debt. Now, we also found out while he was up on the stand that Brocchini had contacted TradeCorp, which is Scott's parent company, and he had falsely alleged to them that he thought Scott might be embezzling money from them. He had found a couple of suspicious charges or some checks that weren't cashed or something, and so he alerted them that he thought that Scott might be embezzling from them. TradeCorp did a full internal audit and found out that that was not true. In fact, their company attorney sent a letter to Brocchini stating that they found zero impropriety, that everything that Scott was doing and everything he was charging and asking for reimbursements on was all legitimate. He wasn't embezzling anything. They'd had a third party auditor, a CPA, look at it, and they found zero impropriety. Now, there was alleged that TradeCorp, as the parent company, had some financial issues. But there was also someone who testified that Scott had no obligation for the debts or losses of his company, right? Just like I wouldn't if my company declared bankruptcy. It's not my job to pay off their debts, right? I'm still getting a paycheck until they shutter the doors. And that was what the situation was with Scott. He was under no obligation to worry about or finance or pay off any debts of his parent company. Now, believe it or not, those were all prosecution witnesses. So again, I'm like, I maybe I'm just a cynic now after having done this for a while, but I kind of asked myself at the end of it, I'm like, where's the beef? Because I'm not seeing where the argument is that they were broke. But it's time for the defense to put their guy up on the stand. And I'm going to have to make one more video. I'm so sorry because there's a lot. And so come back for just one more part.